All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us today for our DATCP Meat Industry office hours. My name is Molly Mueller, and I'm a Public Information Officer here at DATCP. Today's session is being recorded, so it will be posted online and sent out via our Gov Delivery newsletters for viewing. The slides you're about to see today will also be made available online and via GovD newsletter. With us today is our DATCP livestock and meat specialist, Jeff Swenson, who will discuss the impacts and results of meat and poultry resiliency grant program. We welcome our guest speaker, Nelson Gaydos. He's the outreach specialist for the American Association of Meat Processors, and he'll give an overview of the organization, education, and training opportunities that are available, and will touch on national issues facing meat processors. In addition, Paul Humphrey, who's our director of DATCP's Bureau of Meat and Poultry Businesses, will share updates from DATCP's Division of Food and Recreational Safety. At the end of the session, we'll have time for some questions. Paul, how about go ahead and get started? Everyone should be able to see Paul's slides.
All right. Thank you, Molly, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's office hours, and we've got some good things to share here this morning. So briefly, what we'll discuss from my perspective here, we'll go over our upcoming on-site audit. I have a whole litany of industry reminders, which are just helpful tidbits to help everything along. A brief discussion on consultants, when to hire one and what to look for, and then we'll review upcoming training opportunities. So as messaged earlier, we have an on-site audit this year. Those happen every 3 years. FSIS sends 2 auditors to our state to look at our program. And so those dates are now known. So July 27th through August 8th, we'll have FSIS staff here in the state of Wisconsin. If your establishment were to be selected, we would let you know in advance of that. But really, they're looking at our program and our implementation of directives and our policies, less so about individual plants themselves. So there's nothing to really worry about. We look forward to this. It's a good chance for us to demonstrate our program in action. Just again, a carryover reminder on testing for non-listeria monocytogenes, listeria species. Sorry for the mouthful there. FSIS began this testing back in January. Our state program began testing in April, so that's underway. We have had a few detections so far under that program. Again, a reminder for industry, generic E. coli testing has begun as of this week. So with that program, establishments are to be sampling 13 consecutive weeks, and that description fits for very small establishments, which most of our state establishments would meet that criteria. And so, like I said, from now to the next 13 weeks, we'd anticipate establishments to be sampling from their most predominant species from what was harvested last year. Some examples of things that we're looking for and what would be non-compliant with the regulation 310.25 would not be not having procedures written down, not collecting your 13 samples, not graphing and charting those results, and not having those results kept for 12 months. So those are things to make sure that you're doing if you're not doing so already. Reminders on formulations. In the state of Wisconsin, our state program requires formulations to be submitted and approved by the Bureau prior to production. So that's set different from FSIS, but for state establishments, that does apply. One thing to keep note of is please include your case information on the formula at the time of submittal. That helps cut down on the follow-up discussion to get those things approved. One thing of note, best practice is to monitor incoming ingredients rather, to ensure the supplier did not change the formulation and introduce new allergens or change allergens in their production process. And oftentimes that's not messaged out to you as a customer. So please be diligent in keeping an eye on that. So changes can be made to your labeling. A reminder for renewals for the state program. Licenses are due to renew by June 30th. So if you haven't done so, please take care of that. If you do wish to add a new HACCP category that would impact your license fee, doing so at the time of renewal is not the best way to communicate that to our program. The best way to do that is to utilize your weekly meeting, which is the subject of our next slide. So weekly meetings are a great opportunity to discuss with your inspector a whole host of topics. So that's dedicated time to speak with them, reviewing any open NRs, discussing plans for future production or products, facility improvements or construction projects that are up ahead, discussing your inspection needs, which we'll touch on a little bit more detail in a second, sample results, and any kind of changes to directives or policy staff will be sharing out with establishments at those weekly meeting settings. So weekly meetings are vitally important. And as it relates to the inspection schedule, all changes to the inspection schedule should be communicated to your circuit supervisor in advance. Requests for additional days should be made at least 3 days in advance to allow for staff to be allocated appropriately to do that. If your inspection day, that's a normal inspection day, falls on a observed holiday, you would need to request inspection if you wish to have staff come on a holiday, and overtime charges would apply. So we've had instances where plants operate on a holiday, fail to notify us of that, and then what happens is they have production that is without the benefit of inspection, which of course would not be a good thing. A note on the appeal process here in the state of Wisconsin, we've reassessed what we're doing in that regard, and simply put, we are very much in line with what FSIS has outlined in the directive that's linked here, which gives establishments 30 days to appeal a noncompliance or an action. We follow our Bureau's chain of command from the inspector to the supervisor to the manager to myself. So very similar to what FSIS would have. So 30 days is the time period to submit an appeal for a noncompliance or action taken by the department. So a brief discussion here on consultants. And so in the regulation 9 CFR 417.7, that regulation requires an individual to have successfully completed a HACCP training in order to do certain activities. And those include development of a HACCP plan, as stated there in 417.2B, or do things such as reassessment or modification of a HACCP plan, which would apply under 417.3 as well as 417.4A.3I. So those would be like your annual reassessment, changes made for changes to your food safety system, things of that nature. Also, consultants are sometimes engaged to help out with corrective actions as it relates to enforcement actions or different things like that. So some establishments have this capability within their staff, a HACCP trained individual. Other times they seek out a consultant to aid them in those efforts. So some things to consider when hiring a consultant. Talk to many people, talk to several, right? So verify their experience as well as the fit as it relates to you and your establishments. Make sure that there's a good fit, that you can work well together. And as far as evaluate their ability to come on site and meet with you, visit your establishment, observe your process, so that the HACCP plan that they work on developing with you and for you actually fits your process. That's very important. The other thing to maybe consider is training. So what kind of outreach would they provide to you and your employees after they provide back to you a HACCP plan or different forms or different things they may be providing? Are they willing to come on site and walk you through those things? So that's very important that that outreach be offered, because oftentimes what we end up seeing is consultants produce their product, their HACCP plan, their documentation, their corrective actions, and establishments maybe don't understand what those things actually are or how to implement them in their establishment, which then creates a whole nother layer of issues for inspection staff to have to work through, is what's written versus what's actually in practice. So it's important that they explain what it is that they're implementing within your HACCP system. And of course, be engaged in the process. Hiring a consultant is not necessarily, handing off responsibility to somebody else. It's still your HACCP system. It's still your establishment. And so you need to be really engaged in that process. And so as things are developed, right, ask a lot of questions, make sure you're understanding what it is that's detailed in those HACCP documents so that you can actually implement them within your establishment. So We do see those things come up time to time, and I thought maybe it was a good thing to share out as some best practices on how to work with a consultant and how they can maybe help you in your business. So some training opportunities coming up here. These are all offered at UW River Falls Humane Handling Institute. There are three offerings yet this year, and those are detailed for you on the slide. The last one there is a bundle, which includes both days. They're back-to-back days, as you can see, September 18th and 19th, and then October 13th and 14th. So you get both trainings, back-to-back days. And so I just confirmed with Jeff Swenson that reimbursement is available for these trainings. Moving over to UW-Madison, they have a number of trainings coming up this year. The dates to register, the links to register are not yet available, so make sure you're checking out the link provided to make sure you can register when those links are made available. The one to kind of call out here is, again, the basic HACCP course. This would meet the requirement under 417.7 that I talked about earlier, and that's coming up in November. So again, tuition reimbursement would be available for that course as well. So something to consider for you or your employees. And that concludes my topics for the morning.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul.
Yeah.
We'll hold on to questions here till the end. I'm going to go ahead and switch to Jeff's slides, if you'll just give me a moment.
We can have Nelson go if that works for you.
Sure. Go ahead, Nelson. Please take over. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Nelson is the outreach specialist for the American Association of Meat Processors. And one of the goals of our office hours is to let meat processors and people involved in the meat industry know about resources that are available. Nelson, I forget how long you've been with AMP now, Nelson, but you graduated from Penn State University, got a master's degree from Penn State as well. He spent some time in Wisconsin, not only at the Wisconsin Association of Meat Processors Convention, which he's been to a few times, but he did go through the Master Meat Crafter program at UW-Madison and was he graduated in the most recent class of that last December, 2 years ago, December.
2 years. Yep.
2 years. Yep. So Nelson, take it away.
Thank you. So as Jeff mentioned, I've been with the association since 16. I stayed on at Penn State after finishing my master's for about 6 months and taught HACCP and helped set up my some other graduate students set up with some research projects. So I had a hand in some of that stuff as well during my time at Penn State. And started with AMP in 16. Basically, it's very similar to an extension position where if somebody has a problem, I go out and find the answer, whether that be HACCP related. We have HACCP templates on our website, and I myself am more than happy to take a look at somebody's HACCP plan and make edits and stuff. As Paul was mentioning, with HACCP coordinators and editing and making plans and stuff like that, if somebody isn't willing to come on site to do the HACCP plan, do not hire them. I would never recommend writing a HACCP plan for somebody if I'm not physically on site with that person or recommend that. So, but if you have a plan and you just want to get another set of eyes on it, I'm more than happy to take a look. And as I mentioned, we have templates on our website for HACCP plans. They're sort of generic. They'll get you probably 65% of the way, but the idea is that they're very generic and that you can take them, kind of lay them over the process that you're already doing, and then you can make edits and tweak the CCPs and go from there. So that's one of the major things we offer, and that's one of the major things I do with my job. Rest of the job is, anything from regulatory issues to food safety issues. I run our internship program. I'll kind of loop back and give more details about that. Really just anything processors need. I use Ask FSIS a ton if I can't find an issue. If you need supporting documents for any sort of process, I'm happy to help with that as well. So I guess loop back to the internship program I mentioned. So this is a program I started back in 18. And the basic premise is when I was in school, I was exposed to a lot of internship opportunities, and it was always with larger companies like the Tysons, the Cargills, that sort of thing. But I wanted to give students an opportunity to have an internship like that with a small processor, because if no disregard or anything to those larger processors, but if you do an internship with them, you're doing 2 or 3 tasks and you're just doing that and getting very well at those 2 or 3 tasks. If you're in a small meat processor, with a small meat processor, you're doing everything, especially if that processor is harvesting as well. So to really give them a good glimpse of our side of the industry and a wide range of experiences that they can add to their resume. And, selfishly, I hope this would lead to full-time employment for some of those processors and those students as well. So in essence, it's fully customizable. The student will fill out a submission form. They'll give me a geographic preference as to where they want to do their internship. And a lot of them are some of them just mark anywhere. They'll go anywhere in the United States. A lot of them will pick and choose based on either cities they might have relatives in or where their hometown is, that sort of thing. So housing is taken care of. Housing is something I don't require host processors to pay for. I ask that they help, though, help them point them in a good neighborhood, if they can find an apartment complex that can do a 3 or 6 month rent agreement, something along those lines. And then kind of going to that timeline, the main requirement I have is that the student is 18 or older, has their own means of transportation, and that the internship is at least 3 months long. I don't want to schedule an internship longer than that. I just feel it's not, I feel it's a bit rude to the processor to take the time to teach somebody, to show them their facility, get them in the loop, and then as soon as they're kind of willing and able to stand on their own 2 feet, then they're out the door and the internship's done. So, but the minimum 3 months, I've had some go a year, I've had some go 6 months. The majority of students are seeking that summertime between the semesters, but like I said, I've had a lot of students, they'll take a semester off if they're not sure if they want to do grad school or not. So they finish their undergrad, want to gain some hands-on experience, and just kind of want to better navigate where they want to go with their career. But if you are a processor, excuse me, let me back up a little bit. So after they submit their submission form to me, I give them like a generic login code for our website, so they can't see, people's names and phone numbers and email address and that sort of thing, but they can go into our membership, pick out businesses that interest them. They send me that list. I'll contact those processors, see if they're willing and able to host the intern for the internship, and then get that line of communications going and let the two parties work it out from there. I do require that the internship is paid, but I do not require an amount. It's just too much to require an amount across the country when you're talking about rural Wisconsin versus downtown Chicago. That pay difference is going to be astronomical. So I'm just not going there. So I just leave that up to them. As long as both parties are happy, I'm happy. And then just kind of finishing up that part, if you know somebody who might be interested, this can be a student or a recent graduate, or if you yourself are interested in hosting a processor, or excuse me, hosting an intern, please contact me. I'll be happy to try and arrange something like that for you. And I guess that's kind of all I really wanted to cover as far as AMP goes. As far as industry news, there's just a lot of stuff flying hot and heavy. It's tough to keep up with sometimes. The two main ones I did want to focus on are kind of relevant to what I've kind of worked on and kind of help communicate in the industry. The first is during the Biden administration, there was a big push from the Environmental Protection Agency on wastewater treatment. That, as far as we know, has been put on hold. We do not know when that news will change, if something will come down, if tweaks will be made to the original proposal. We're not even going to try and guess as to where they're going to go with it, but when we find something out, we will communicate that out to our members. I guess looping back a little bit, so we have two major ways of communicating with our processors members. We have a monthly amplifier that goes out, kind of like the main headlines that have happened over the month. And then we have a weekly email that goes out as well called Choice Cuts that really is the quick, up-to-date information on the industry, information of what's going on with our association. I'll go back and mention our convention as well, but that's our weekly email that goes out. But like I said, the wastewater thing is on hold for the moment. We'll let you know what changes with that. And then the second thing was it was actually a processor from Montana reach out to me, and he had a kind of pseudo surprise OSHA audit that kind of popped in on his facility, and he had been made aware of it. This came out this was earlier this year, and then we turned it into an article into our latest amplifier that came out in May. So it came out a couple weeks ago, like mid-May. But basically, it's just a article stressing being proactive. And this person who, like I said, he's a Montana processor, but he was in talks with his state inspection program, and they kind of basically told him that this is going to be happening. You should kind of get your ducks in a row. Not that anything was like glaringly bad, but just some very minor tweaks here and there, like hand washing stations and electrical outlets and that sort of thing. But it's stuff that could have resulted in probably several $1,000s worth of fines that only took a couple $100 to make those changes and replace ahead of time. And the audit went really well. So just an article encouraging people to be proactive in terms of not just inspection and food safety and everything, but also that OSHA aspect of their process and their business as well. And then the last point I wanted to hit, I touched on our national convention. So we have a convention every year. Let me pull up the dates just to be sure. But we rotate around the country. We stick mostly in the Midwest because that's where the majority of our membership is. But this year we will be in Kansas City, Missouri, from July 24th to 26th. And then next year we'll be up your way. We'll be up in Milwaukee, July 9th through the 11th. And that is, WOMP, WOMP has us beat on the Cured Meat Show. There's no doubt about that. But we got them beat in terms of the size of the trade show and everything like that, and booth numbers and that kind of stuff. But just educational sessions, the Cured Meat Show, as I mentioned, and trade shows and all sorts of suppliers, spice companies, equipment companies, everything that you need to help improve your business, it'll be there. So encourage attendance in Kansas City as well as in Milwaukee in the following years. That's pretty much all I have. So happy to go along with the program here. Stick around for any questions that might come my way.
I have one question before we move on, just while everyone is thinking about the internship program. If a processor is interested in hosting a student, they should reach out to you?
Yes.
Yep.
I kind of have a short list that I'll add that processor to, in case somebody gives me a state that they want to work in or they don't have any preference, in which case I'll send them this list of processors that are already interested in hosting and try and culminate something from there.
I'm looking at the names of some of the processors that are on, and some of them are near universities that have animal science and meat science courses. So
excellent.
Might be a good fit.
I would encourage you to also directly reach out to Dr. Sindelar or Heather Hunt at UW as well. Just, hey, if you guys have any students that are interested in doing something over the summer, or heck, even if they're close enough, I leave it completely up to the processor. If they just want to have somebody come on like over Christmas break or something like that, by all means, I'm happy to help bridge that. If anybody wants that, I personally would like more time just for your sake. If you're training somebody, you want them to be in your facility for a long time. But, by all means, I'm happy to foster any sort of connections and relationships that lead to more people coming into our side of the industry.
And Nelson's contact information can be found on the AMP website. aamp.com is the website. remember correctly.
Yeah, I can.
And a lot of information on that. Some of the information is specific for members only, and membership information is available on that website as well, aamp.com.
I'll throw my email address in the chat of the meeting as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Nelson.
You're welcome.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much, Nelson, for that great information, and Jeff for your questions. I should be sharing your presentation, and it should be in present mode. And Jeff, when you're ready, you can go ahead and take over, and I'll advance slides for you.
It sounds great. And I should say that if you have questions for Nelson, he's going to stick around. You can put them in the chat, and we can kind of get a list of questions if you do have questions for him or Paul. I'll talk a little bit about the Meat and Poultry Resiliency Grant Program that now has concluded. So the projects needed to be completed by December 30th, 2024. Then there was a 60-day period to get final reimbursements and things turned in. But by and large, all of that's done. So we do have some results on the grant program and some of the impacts that we saw from them. So you can go ahead and advance, Molly. The Meat and Poultry Resiliency Grant, I think that people that have joined these calls in the past are aware of this. Governor Evers created the program by investing $10 million of America Rescue Plan Act money, specifically for meat processor grants. Now, the grants were capped at $150,000 per project, and you can move along. And the one thing that I want to stress is that this wasn't just something that happened. There was a lot of work behind the scenes, and we have to go back and think about what was going on at the time. So COVID challenges had just begun to start. Meat processors were feeling the effect of that. And it was Secretary Romansky that had requested that I set up some stakeholder calls. So I think at some of these earlier calls, there were 30 or more meat processors and those from allied industries to talk about the challenges they were facing through COVID. And it became evident that there was a need for investment in the meat sector. And the meat processors that were on that call had some very, very strong opinions about how a grant program should work. First of all, they said, no grant program, we don't take free money. That was a message that we heard early on. And then I owe this meat processor from Wisconsin, very well-known meat processor, a debt of gratitude, because he was the one that had said on a call that what would happen if for every dollar the state invests in our operation, we have to match that dollar for dollar. And that turned the tide. And meat processors said, we can live with that. That's something that makes sense to them. They knew that their investments would be well thought through, knowing that they had to match that money, and that they would have to have access, or at least some access to funds, borrowed or otherwise, in order to move forward with the program. And we had said that we wanted to make impacts in the meat industry, and our numbers were a little bit lower than what the meat processors countered with. They said that if it's a harvest plant that harvests, we need to see at least a 20% increase in harvest capacity. And if it's a further processor, they would need to see a 20% increase in product throughput and product volume. Go ahead, Molly. And so the real goals of the program turned into basically four parts. It was to maintain and strengthen Wisconsin's competitiveness in the meat sector. Nelson alluded to it. We have a lot of meat processors in the state, about 500 licensed meat processors when you count state and federal. Some of those are pizza companies and cold storage units, but we have several meat processors in the state, and we wanted to increase harvest capacity. At this point in time, harvest appointments were hard to get for many direct marketers and farmers. So waiting lists for harvest appointments grew to 2 years and more during this time, and we wanted to increase further processing capacity. And we thought that increasing further processing capacity would help with the increasing slaughter capacity as well. And meat processors in the state, many of them are multi-generational. They've been around for a long time, and we knew that some of the infrastructure was aging. And this was one thing that the meat processors on the stakeholder calls really brought up and said that let's update some infrastructure so we can become more efficient and harvest more livestock and increase our throughput. Go ahead. So we received 100 applications requesting $11.1 million. There was $10 million available. 88 awardees were announced in 48 counties. And here's a kind of a map of the counties and the meat processors that received those grants. Go ahead. So the awardees really ranged from brand new businesses. I don't know that many processors, or I don't know that many establishments began because there was grant money available. I don't know that anybody said, let's apply for a grant and build a butcher shop, but there were people that had been thinking about that, maybe ready to start breaking ground. But during COVID, supply chain issues as far as building supplies and things like that happened. And I think that the grants helped make the decision a little bit easier to move forward. This is Polly's Chop Shop in Luxembourg, and they were a meat processor that was started with the idea of processing hogs that they had raised themselves, and with grant funds, they built a brand new plant, and it's a beautiful new facility, nice retail shop if you ever get to visit. So there were also well-known companies as well as a few startups like Polly's. Go ahead. So I'll back up a little bit. I don't have a specific slide on it, but some of the themes that we saw was for projects was livestock holding pens and updating livestock holding pens, making that larger to increase harvest capacity, cooler space. We had processors that told us that they can absolutely harvest more livestock. They just don't have the cooler space for all those carcasses. So cooler updating and replacement was definitely a popular project with the meat processors that were involved. And product flow changed in many places just to make it more food safe as they added equipment with grant funding. And the equipment was pretty much typical of what you would see as far as of equipment that you see in meat processing plants. Grant funds were used to buy just about everything, whether it was grinders and mixers and things like that. One that surfaced early on was roll stock machines. And I will fully admit that from my standpoint and Secretary Romanski's standpoint, early on, we thought, why do they need packaging equipment to increase harvest capacity? And it didn't take us long for meat processors to set us right on that and let us know that that's the bottleneck. That was absolutely the bottleneck. They have 3 people that package meat all day, whether it's from custom harvest or harvest for direct marketers or sausage products. And by freeing up some of those employees to do other jobs, they could harvest more animals, number one, but increase productivity as well. So I said that employees trained to do other jobs within businesses, because with that roll stock machine, every time that I talked to someone that bought one of those, they said, well, we used to have 3 people. It was always 3 people. We had 3 people that packaged all day. Now it just takes 1 or 1.5 to run that roll stock machine. And initially I thought, well, we're putting people out of work with automation, which was not what we intended with the grant program. And they said, oh, no, we hired somebody new to run the roll stock machine and move those other 3 people to do other things because they had been with us for a while. So it turned into an employee retention as well. So 78% of those that received the grant added at least 1 full-time employee, and new employees at the plants range from adding 1 to 25 full-time and several part-time employees as well. Go ahead, Molly. So all in establishments that harvest did increase harvest capacity. Those that focused on harvest absolutely met the 20% increase in harvest. Some split their project between harvest and production. And if you look at what they were doing, they maybe not hit 20% on harvest capacity, but overall they increased productivity by more than 20% in that plant. Projects increased harvest capacity at butcher shops and larger scale processing facilities, 2 to 3 head, all the way up to 300 head per day. That 300 head per day is a little bit of an outlier with some new skinning area within a large packing plant. As I said before, our processors ranged all over the board as far as size. So a 2 or 3 head weekly harvest capacity increase may not seem like a lot, but it was 20% for those processors. And if you multiply that out, that could be up to 300 head per, that could end up to be 150 or more head per year. And that makes a big impact in a small community that's looking for harvest appointments. Go ahead, Molly. So just a couple more slides here. The grants range from 25,000 to 150,000. So not everybody applied for the full $150,000 grant funds. Project sizes ranged from $50,000 to $8 million. We'll get more into the significance of those numbers here in a little bit. So the processor that applied for 25,000, it was a $50,000 project, 25,000 of grant funds and 25 out of their own pocket. And all establishments had to meet the 1-for-1 match requirement. Go ahead, Molly. And finally, just some of the responses that we got from meat processors as we evaluated their final project reports. So of the initial grant awardees, 218 full-time employees were added, 68 part-time employees were added at those plants. Now, these numbers are self-reported, so I need to keep that in mind. This is information that meat processors gave us. We didn't dig through their books to verify this, but increased gross profits from those that received grants was $32,416,000. So that's self-reported because of the grant project that they completed. All the processors added together would see a $32 million increase in gross profits. And interestingly, this was a $10 million grant program, but investments by meat processors participating was $41 million. And that works out to each grant dollar increased meat processors gross by $3.97, and each grant dollar spurred $5.04 in its industry investment. So the grant program really spurred more investment than just that $10 million that was used for the federal funds. Go ahead, Molly. And that's it. There's my contact information if anybody's interested. And again, we'll open it up to questions for Paul Nelson or myself.
Yes, thank you so much, Jeff. Appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and swap out for one last slide that has a QR code on there for a survey. And while I do that, yes, please, let's go ahead and open it up for any questions for Jeff, Paul, or our guest, Nelson.
I have a question for Jeff.
Yeah.
Do you see this grant, maybe not this exact style, but do you see this continuing in the future?
So we ended up with 2 grant programs for meat processors through this. So the $10 million was one-time American Rescue Plan Act money pledged by the governor. The legislature approved funding of $200,000 per year of state funds to be used. So we are now in our 5th cycle, actually, of our 4th cycle for meat processors for those $200,000 grants. Very similar. The 2 grant programs are identical in what can be done with the money as far as equipment and what can't be done with the money. But the cap is smaller. So there's a $50,000 cap on that money. So right now that program is at $200,000 per year. Last fiscal year, the legislature did up the money to $2 million for the fiscal year. So we had $1.8 million in 2004, and then it went back to the $200,000 in 2025. So we will open up the grants again in January for the 2006 round, and we'll have $200,000 unless anything happens at the Capitol to increase that funding. And I understand that there are talks about that. Don't know much other than the legislature is talking about increasing those funds.
Very nice.
We're oversubscribed, Nelson, yet. So when we have $200,000 for grant funding, we get 50 or 60 grant applications asking for millions of dollars. So there's still definitely a need.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I don't see anything in the chat at this time. If anyone else has questions, please feel free to unmute and jump on in.
I'll make a comment while to either wrap up or while people are thinking of questions. On the internship program, I've heard Nelson talk about it before, but I think that it's worth not only reaching out to EW-Madison, but Platteville and River Falls as well, because I'm looking at some of the meat processors that are on, and I don't know that you're interested in taking on an intern for 3 months, but it will be worth having conversations with both you and those universities.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. All right. I'll give everyone just another second or two to jump in if they have a last minute question. Otherwise, I think I'll wrap us up.
And Nelson, I owe you an apology for not thinking of the time zone difference.
I'm kind of used to it when I talk to a Wisconsinite, so we're good.
At least we don't do this to you all the time.
Yeah, well, I've gotten quite anal about doing like CT or ET on times when I'm talking to people, so it's fine. We're good.
Yep, he asked that question early on. So Nelson is in Pennsylvania, so he's coming to us from the future, actually. So
it's not much different. So
I
nothing
was
new and
going to say,
exciting
what's
to
going on
report.
over there?
It's sunny and maybe a high of 75 down here. I don't know. I know you guys are kind of smoky up there at the moment, but it hasn't quite reached down here yet. I don't know if it will, but.
All right. Well, it sounds like we are wrapping up for questions here. All right. Everyone should see that QR code currently on their screen. You're encouraged to please take that short survey. It's great for if you have any ideas on future topics related to the meat industry office hours, anything you may want to hear, whether they be topics, some guest speakers you might be interested in hearing from. We're always looking for great new ideas to share with industry professionals. So this wraps up today's session. Thank you all again so much for joining us. And a special thanks to our guests from the American Association of Meat Processors, Nelson Gaydos. And we're also always happy to have Jeff Swenson and Paul Humphrey with us too. Today's session, of course, has been recorded. I'll post that online by the end of the week, and we'll also send that out along with the slides you saw today in a GovDelivery newsletter. Join us next time for our next office hours. With that, thank you again and have a great day.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.